Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ellen Mains. I work for International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group, and I'm based in Port Moresby. Thank you so much to PNG Corps for hosting this important session, and thanks to all of you for joining us after what's been a very jam-packed week. We are here today to share our learnings from the Meri Save Trades program. The program is delivered in partnership between International Finance Corporation and the PNG Business Coalition for Women. Thank you to Australia and New Zealand for supporting this program. Okay, so I'd also like to thank the 18 leading companies that participated in the program, many of whom are here in the audience today and of course on the stage with us. Why this program, Meri Save Trades, and why now? Well, women are underrepresented in trades and technical jobs in PNG. How often do you see images like this of women in technical jobs in workwear on site? Not so very often. We know that when men and women flourish, the whole country can grow. In designing this program, we realised there was a really huge opportunity. We wanted to look at how we could achieve more gender balance in technical and trade roles, and we found this data that actually, by closing a gap in women's participation, it would increase PNG's GDP by 20%. 20%, that's huge. We also found that women do know trades. Women were interested and qualified to do these technical roles. Sometimes they were hired and just not sticking around, but we also found that company policies and practices were not necessarily supporting women's retention and progression once they were in the organisations. So what does the program look like? Well, the member companies, the 18 companies I showed before, all commit to at least 2 of these commitment areas within their organisation, and they develop an action plan to help them achieve more gender balance in their operations. As part of the program, International Finance Corporation and Business Coalition for Women work together with these firms to help them implement their action plan. So far, with those 18 firms, we're reaching 15,000 employees, so it really is very sizable. And to date, we've had 17 different workshops. These are soft skills training, this is technical training, this is practical advice, like how do you implement a family and sexual violence policy? How do you pitch to the board about your idea to provide childcare support on site? So we've got 6 months left to go in the program. And we're really getting now far into it in that we've now got some really strong recommendations and some learnings from the companies who've been on the journey. So without further ado, I want to put your hands together for the panel today. They don't need much further introduction. Most of you know them already. All right, so what we want to do with this panel is really help to share with you why does gender inclusion matter to these PNG firms. So what I want to do is come first to Hannah Pepson from TotalEnergies. TotalEnergies has a real global focus on strengthening women's participation in technical jobs. Can you share some of the challenges that you've had in implementing, this new focus?
Yes. Thank you, Ellen, for that question, and I'd like to address 3 key points with that. The first one being childcare responsibilities. Childcare responsibilities are barriers for working parents, and in particular women. And IFC studies showed that there was a lack of childcare in impacting parents' ability to turn up to work on time and to be productive. A classic example of that in PNG and what I've seen my organization is when a parent has to take half a day or a day to look after a sick child. So I know that a lot of firms in here probably have the same problem where we do have to factor in a day or two when a colleague or someone working for you has to look after a child. Another point that I would like to make is the second one, which is higher rates of gender-based violence in PNG. So we find that higher rates of gender-based violence in PNG make creating a safe and respectful workplace challenging. Victims are reluctant to come forward or use the Vele subscription, which we have in place. Most times, victims may feel ashamed due to many reasons, the biggest being some of our cultural differences in PNG. Other reasons include concerns about confidentiality, and they also are concerns for safety. The third is a bias and stereotype. Bias and stereotypes about women's abilities to perform in their workplace may hinder women's abilities to progress and to be respected and impactful in their roles.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Hannah. And I think for you, coming into TotalEnergies rather new, it must be really refreshing to see a workplace that's already starting to recognise some of these challenges and address them. Next, I'm going to come to my left here to Marcia. Now, Marcia Pokapin is actually the Regional Manager for Total Waste Management and works on site. So she's got extensive experience as a leader in very technical roles. Yeah. And Marcia, what I wanted to ask you was, you're on site, you're working in a very male-dominated environment. What are some of the challenges that yourself and other women experience working on job sites?
Okay. Thanks, Ellen. From experience, I think regardless of the environment that we go into, I've worked in just mainly male-dominated environment for almost 13 years now, on the factory lines, in production lines from the shop floor up, and now coming into total waste management in the oil and gas industry. One thing I've realized is really taken seriously as a female leader, being undermined, especially when we are faced with where we have to make tough decisions, and people are watching. And especially for us females, we are, they say females are more emotional, and we show empathy, and sometimes it can come across as being weak. So everyone's, especially your team, they're looking up to you and seeing that whether your decisions will come about as being biased or where favoritism may come in, and that's where we easily can lose respect. So we have to be very careful in making sure that the decisions that we make are all fair. And when they say, do not take things personally, a lot of the times we're being undermined with making sure that, the decisions that we make are fair across the board. It's funny how I saw one of a post yesterday on LinkedIn where someone actually talked about not wanting to report to female bosses because they're more emotional when they come about when doing their decisions. So that's basically one of the main challenges, regardless of the environment that we go into. That's one of the main challenge that we will face, being undermined, and we will really get challenged, especially from dealing with male ego, the disrespect as well. So so just basically.
Thanks so much, and it's really interesting. You're working on these remote sites. I think maybe some people might expect you to say the biggest challenge is security, or the biggest challenge is, I don't know, the facilities that are available. Yeah. So I think it's really insightful to hear from you about this challenge as being a leader is actually around,
So I think a lot of companies have really improved in ensuring that they create a safe workplace environment for not only females, but all of their workers on site. When I first started as well in my first industry that I worked in, there was not a lot of, they didn't allow females to work the night shifts, work after hours. And when I first started, they slowly started getting into that space where we were able to work the afternoon, the night shifts, work 12 hours, work over the weekend. So a lot of companies are really doing a lot to create that safe workplace environment for everyone.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. That's really positive. Next, I want to go to Isabel. Now, Isabel Maguire is the country manager for Swires shipping for both PNG and the Solomon Islands. And actually, that promotion happened during this program. So congratulations on your role.
Thank you.
really interested to hear, Isabel, from you on your career journey. And what do you think some of the biggest challenges are for other women to make it into the leadership roles?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen, and thanks for having me here today. My journey started when I was 18, and probably as a lot of other 18-year-olds, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And by absolute fluke, I got an internship in Hamburg at Pentagon Freight Services, and the female country manager at the time quite liked me, and then found a new try-qualifying study where you did an apprenticeship, you studied economics and logistics, and you worked full-time. So I did that and finished that in 2012. In 2014, I moved to Brisbane, working closely with the oil and gas companies in Papua New Guinea. And so that really inspired me, and I wanted desperately to move to Papua New Guinea, and found a job with Dogra Projects in Lae, which I moved to. And so my partner and I moved there, lived there for 6 years, got married, had 3 kids, who are all Mungi PNG through and through. And I really enjoy working in the diverse culture that Papua New Guinea is, and obviously, especially in the logistics sector, we've heard it in a couple of other sessions over the last days, it can be quite challenging. So I really enjoy that. But I also, now reflecting on my journey, I can really see how I was still quite wet behind the ears in terms of leadership and how to manage people and myself. 4 years ago, that took a 180 turn when I started with Swires shipping pretty much on the day. 4 years ago, leading their branch in Lae, I had 2 male country managers before me who are very openly female leader allies, and who have really taught me a lot about leadership and how to be a good leader going forward. So at Swire, we also have really a great network of strong female peers. We bounce ideas off each other, we have each other's backs, and I had never experienced that before, and I've learned a lot from them as well. Being in P&G for so long, and I think the other 2 ladies have mentioned it as well, there is, you notice a lot of injustices, and I was never really aware of the biases and the problems women's faced until I sort of progressed in my career. There are a lot of injustices, and there's a lot of limitations to non-traditional jobs that women should have in terms of potentially hospitality or admin, and we are seen as being the weaker sex, and we have to be very firm to get to where we should be, and sometimes even I feel like we have to act like men to be seen as being the same level of seniority. I had a couple of instances where peers from other companies said, "Oh, it's maybe a little bit weird if I take you out for a business dinner," but then they have no problems doing that with male predecessors. Again, sort of echoing what was mentioned already, there is a lack of supportive policies all around the world. That's not only in P&G, flexible working hours so that you can have a family, but also focus on your career is, I think, something that is really, really important. So overall, I don't think that there is a biggest challenge for women. There is definitely several big challenges, and I think females in Papua New Guinea probably definitely face a whole set of other problems than that I might have faced. I've got a very supportive husband who stays at home with our three boys, so that makes it a lot easier. Over my time at Swire Shipping, I've become really passionate about this gender equality topic, and I really want to be an active member of changing this status quo. So 2 years ago, I'd taken on the lead of our new gender EAG that was formed in Swire Shipping. And through that, we've launched an allyship program which should be rolled out globally within the next year, and we've trained our senior cohort in 2024. And locally in P&G, I really want to focus on our female development. I would like to be seen as a role model and help them progress, and especially now more so than ever before, I guess. We also focus a lot around equal training opportunities. So when we have training programs, we make sure that it's at least 50-50 of females and males being trained, so that everyone has the same chance in progressing through the company. And I'm quite happy that in our senior leadership team in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, we have 50% women in that team. So I think that's really great. Coming back to my career, 2 years ago, we moved to Port Moresby, where I took on the regional commercial manager, and now I'm the country manager for the last couple of months, and yeah, the rest is history.
I think that deserves a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing so candidly about your journey, Isabel, because I think that's actually very useful and inspiring for other women here, and I'd say the same to both of you. I think it really helps to see other women shining in these leadership roles and progressing in their organisations. But now I wanted to come to David Cusick from Rhodes. So David is a Chief Sales Officer. We've been working with you for some time, David. And actually, I don't know if you saw this, but actually Rhodes featured on the front page of the Post-Courier on Friday for their efforts around gender inclusion, which is quite extraordinary, I think. What I want to hear from you, David, is why does investing in gender equality make good business sense for Rhodes Construction?
So if we want to have a look at it from the beginning, over the past several years, we commenced the journey with EDGE certification. So under the EDGE certification, also with working with Meri Save Trades, we've improved a number of things within the workplace. Our policies have improved. Our communication of those policies through to our staff have improved at the same time. Gender inclusion with recruitment is a very important thing. You'll notice some of the ads that go up that we put out for our recruitment side. You'll have the gender equality component in there. And that's really important in the business, and it's driven from the top down. And that's one of the key things through our owners down to the senior management, down to the ground floor level, has been really important to us. Some of the other things that we've looked at is the alignment of employee benefits, which has been very beneficial. And when you look at your employees, who are one of your key resources within the organisation that help those improvements within the business, they're the ones that we focus with a lot of the communication side, which I mentioned earlier. Some of the other points that we have a look at is I was mentioning about better communication, gender inclusion actions. We also include it in our tenders that go out for a lot of the work that we do. A lot of the, let's say, AusAid projects and also other projects that are funded through other organisations, their focus is more and more on the gender equality side. The EDGE certification, which we've had for the third time now, has been very important to us. There's a lot of work that's involved in the background as well as part of that certification. And our team, not only myself, but our team below me that working on that also need to be congratulated, because that's something that we have auditors come in from overseas, and that information, that audit is conducted by them, and the information is reviewed further overseas and then brought back to us on our results. So the third time for us to have that is very important and very special for us. The other part to it as well is for the first time we've been able to have a female on the board of directors, and that's a very important part to the business, and we've seen that as very beneficial for us as well at the same time.
Thanks so much, David, and huge congratulations on this achievement. I mean, having 3 EDGE gender certifications is something that has not been achieved globally. So, like the headline said, PNG beats the world. We really have on this one in terms of gender equality at Rhodes, and I can hear from what you're saying that it's really affecting your bottom line, and it's a really positive thing for the organisation. I wanted to come next to Vele Rupa. So Vele is the GM of Corporate Affairs for Steamships Group. And we're hearing globally, Vele, about resistance to gender inclusion in the workplace. What's your opinion on this? Are men being left behind?
That's a great question and a tough one from a PNG cultural perspective. very masculine. But just like Steamships, the organization is a pathfinder, for the last 106 years. For the last 106 years, it has been that leading business pathfinding into the unknown. And so I guess for us as an organization, I don't believe that men have been left behind.
Yeah.
We're all going on a journey together. And that's important, because what that really does for us is that it reflects that PNG is a diverse community. One thing that I learned very early on in my career when I was working at ExxonMobil is that when we looked at all the communities that are impacted up in the islands, one thing stuck out real quickly is that when you educate a mother, when you empower a mother, when you educate a young woman, you take the family, you take the community on prosperity.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really important for all of us. So we've spoken a lot about some of the challenges. What I want to come to now, and I'm sure what the audience is very interested in, well, we've talked about some of the challenges, but what are the solutions? How can organisations in PNG think about gender inclusion differently? And on this, I wanted to come to Isabel first, because we can't speak about solutions on gender inclusion without addressing one of the most difficult topics to talk about, and that is family and sexual violence. And I wanted to hear from you about what Swires Shipping has done around this topic.
Yeah, thank you. I think globally, and especially ever since COVID and during COVID and after COVID, there was definitely a rise in family and sexual violence all around the world, and the impact has always been bigger in the Pacific Islands and Papua New Guinea region. At Swires Shipping, we have zero tolerance for any form of violence, and of course, family and sexual violence, no difference. It is really important for us to keep our employees safe, be it physical or psychological, because only then they can really be the best version of themselves and bring the results that the business needs. When the BCFW from Papua New Guinea approached us 3 years ago, the former country manager, Alistair Skingley, did not hesitate 1 minute to work together with Yvonne Kennedy to make up a policy. So we formed a committee out of local senior management, as well as our people division in London and Singapore. And I think with every document or any policy that you develop, it has to be meaningful and it has to be relevant to the country. So it was really great to see that Swires Shipping took the initiative to make it a local policy and really listen to the management and what is important for us. So what we've done is we collected a lot of information and we did a lot of education for our employees. We provide support for the survivors in terms of the local contact team that we have trained, as well as showing them where they can go to get external support in terms of safe houses, Belize was mentioned, etc. In terms of the policy, we've got special leave and as well as financial support that we've included in the policy. And I think especially for the management, it's really important to understand the impact of FSV in our country. So our contact teams were trained in both Lae and Port Moresby, where we have our biggest offices, and they've got a phone for anonymous calls that they can make outwards as well as receive. We do a lot around awareness session, town halls, which we do regionally as well as locally. I think only implementing the policy is not enough. Those kind of things fizzle out. It's really important to have an ongoing conversation around it and having ongoing awareness in the business. The communication needs to come from the leadership. The leadership needs to lead by example. They need to be fully supportive of the policy and what it stands for. And for any business house, I think it's really important to to celebrate the little wins that you can only have on a topic so difficult as this. I think any reported case is a win. So I think that is something that we need to keep in the back of our minds. And I think for business houses in general, it should be one of the #1 priorities to invest in the safety of their people. And while it is the right thing to do, it also has an economical benefit for the business. And of course, the employee well-being should always be the #1.
Thanks so much, Isabel. I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer that this is something that all organisations should be considering. I think what was really interesting about what you said was it's got to be culturally and contextually suitable. So you can't just pick up an international policy and roll it out in PNG. You need to be thoughtful about how you do it.
Yeah.
You need to have that buy-in from management. And also you need to partner locally with organisations who understand best practice, like the PNG Business Coalition for Women. So that's a really useful tip for anyone in the audience who's looking to try and address these challenges within your operations. I think that's really useful. Now I wanted to come back to Vele. I mean, one of the things that the Meri Save Trades program focuses on is how we communicate about inclusion. I already put some pictures up of women in trades and mentioned that this is not something we see so often in PNG. But I wanted to ask you, Vele, you know, as the Corporate Affairs Manager, how does Steamships Group make women more visible through your communications and also the language you use around inclusion as well?
In Papua New Guinea, one of our favorite pastime is really sitting around corners or circles and telling stories. And so for us, communicating has to be simple. And communicating about understanding where everybody is, but at the same time being able to listen. Sometimes we all like to talk, and then there are moments where we don't want to listen. And I think it's important that if you want to be inclusive, you have to listen. In the most recent times, we have changed our tone of voice as an organization. The tone of voice, the posture, not only being inclusive to the progress of women, but the community at large. So in most recent times, if you would see the growth of steamships, it's now inclusive of landowners as well. It's also getting into that posture that we want everyone to see steamships as a partner of choice. And there are great projects that we're currently doing. One, for example, is Dobel up in Hagen, and that's with the business community up in Mount Hagen, the Darkwood family and Teninga. Another great example is Harborside South, and that's with our landowners from the Western Province, and Gulf Maritime Services, which is another JV that we've just recently started up and will be operationalized in Q1 2025, and that's about the landowners of the Gulf of Papua. But being inclusive really is about listening to everybody. I think one thing personally that I've made a choice is that my team is actually an all-women's team. I'm actually the only guy in the team. And the 3 managers that are below me are fantastic.
Yeah.
and that is me saying, recognizing talent and attitude is very important. And being able to communicate and at times listen to them. Even when you think you know everything, you still have to listen. So being inclusive is really about listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vele, for sharing that. And I'm so pleased that you're considering yourself as a partner of choice. Would you also say that you're an employer of choice? And would that message be really important through the way you recruit and you advertise as well for jobs?
Definitely. definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more when companies advertise for positions, whether they be these technical and trades roles, we see organisations now using images of men and women and putting on their job ads, men and women are encouraged to apply. And I think this is fantastic. We know that there's a shortage of skilled workers for some of these more technical jobs. So these things are really important, and you're right. Language matters and storytelling matters, and I think we've had some of the best storytellers in the world here the last few days. I've certainly heard some good ones. Now I wanted to go back to you, Marcia. We talked a little bit earlier about, on-site, some of the challenges that women experience working on-site. We've got a lot of companies in the audience here. What can be done to make women feel more comfortable in these technical and trades roles and roles on sites, on job sites?
I think I have 3 very important key points. Number 1 is communication, that's one. The support, and also first-time impression always sticks, right? So it has to start from the beginning. When we are, for example, when you're already interviewing, let's say, a potential candidate, right? Even though they will be successful or not, you all already start to highlight, some of the policies and, advertising your company already about what are the things that the company does to create a safe workplace environment. And then once you get someone on board, then it starts also with the onboarding process. And that's where communication comes in with highlighting, okay, these are the policies we have in place should you are faced in a situation where you have to address certain issues. These are some of the policies we have in place where we can go to. One of the things that TWM is, after a survey that was done to see, okay, what are the policies can we have in place to make create a much safe environment, right, for all our employees, and some of the things that have come about, like partnering with Vele and creating a family sexual violence policy, a grievance policy, so certain things like that. Some of the other commitments that we're aiming to do by 2027 is that 50-50 % gender workforce, right? And we've achieved one of that already earlier this year with the regional manager's role. Right now that we have myself and another female colleague that is managing this very important contract that we have for our client, right, in both Exxon side, both upstream and downstream. So it just shows the trust that the management has in its female workforce to be able to handle important contracts that we have within the company. So it really needs to be driven from the top down. That support is there. So because we have, middle management of female workers who are in contact with your workforce on a daily basis, and when we have that support, that when we have to make tough decisions, we have that support from the top down, that we're able to enforce those and help our people as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. And what's really interesting about what you just said is all those things you just shared don't cost money.
No.
It doesn't cost money to have a supportive management. It doesn't cost money to put in place a policy. You're not asking for, a new building to be built or something like that. So I think that's really interesting. What about some of the practical things on site that can be done to make women feel more comfortable?
Yeah, I think the most obvious one, I think we discussed that also last week, and I think a lot of companies we still have to cater for, especially for us women in the fields. We're required to wear PPEs out in the field, and when it comes to catering for when women are pregnant and things like this, where I think still a lot of improvement that we need to do there. Those very basic things to make us feel comfortable, also still out there being safe when we're working out at the field. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I know one of the conversations that's been happening is about paid maternity leave, because at the moment, in the private sector, there is no paid maternity leave that's mandated. So that's certainly an opportunity as they review the Employment Act to start thinking about, is this something that could really help businesses to retain women and help them progress as well? David, I wanted to talk about that on the topic of childcare. I know that Rhodes Construction participated in our study on childcare, looking at what were some of the challenges and barriers for working parents, working Papua New Guinean mothers and fathers to childcare. And I know that Rhodes have taken action, and I wondered whether you could share a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was some time ago we did recognise that it was becoming an issue for our staff, not only for our staff, but also for the community. As part of that, we set up Swires International Primary School at our site. That also assisted our employees and also the local community at Rockhu. Some of the things that they were faced with and our employers were faced with, getting their children to school. If anybody knows the road or what it was out towards our way, there was some concerns, and the travel time to get everybody, especially from Rockhu, into town. And now they've got the great opportunity where that school is on our site, and they can be there in the workplace, where people are working at the same time, and not only from the school perspective, but also for the childcare perspective as well. And that's worked out really well for us. It's certainly well received also, not only from our staff, but also the local community in Rockhu.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that you're considering not just the needs of your employees, but your community as well. I think that that's really important in terms of how can you become also a company that's serious about progressing, not just as a firm making money in PNG, but also helping the country really grow and flourish, and this next generation of Papua New Guineans to be educated to come through the workforce. Maybe you'll see them working for you one day, David.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really interesting to hear that these initiatives, we've talked about initiatives around family and sexual violence, we've talked about communications, we've talked about childcare, we've talked about what can be done on site. I mean, I think the other thing it would be interesting to hear from you, Hannah. Earlier on you mentioned about how TotalEnergies is addressing some of the challenges around bias, and that you're doing some innovative culture change solutions, and I'd love to hear some more about what you're doing in this space.
Thank you, Ellen. Well, we've introduced Diversity Inclusion Day, which is driven by our people and culture. So we've thought that it's time that we, just as Vele said, we all come together and discuss things as a Melanesian culture. So we have days where we kind of just have a bit of awareness on some things which might be, we might have an unconscious bias sometimes about gender issues. So we are able to reflect on our behaviors in the workplace and see if there are certain things that we don't actually realize are kind of biased. An example of that would be having a male employee go and pick up his children. That is sometimes seen as something that a mother can do or a female. So it's little things like that where there are activities that we do in households that may be seen as male or female activities. So just having our diversity inclusion days, at least once a month, we stop and reflect on our activities at home and what we bring into the workplace as well.
Yeah, it's really fantastic to hear that TotalEnergies have such a focus on creating that culture internally, because, you know, we're hearing about these different policies that you can have in place. We're hearing about it's important for management to really support initiatives, but if you don't change that workplace culture to be a place where men and women can work alongside each other and be productive and flourish in their work, then you're not going to get the business benefits that have been described here. So thanks so much for sharing that. I think a lot of people can learn from that. So you've heard about some different solutions that these companies have put in place, and I think some of them are very innovative. But I wanted to ask the panelists to give perhaps one tip that they have for companies here today on what they could perhaps consider in terms of addressing gender inclusion. David, I might start with you on this one.
Sure.
What would you like to advise?
The advice would be not only to stop from inclusion in the workplace, but also inclusion in the community. We've got a great story with a lady, Susan, who is a young entrepreneur, I can call her that, business owner and also managing director of a construction company that's assisting with some works out on the estate, and with support through Rhodes as well. she's going really well out there, and it's a great good news story for Roku as well, that somebody has come up the ranks, into the business world, setting up her own business and working in construction projects at the same time. So I think, like I say, not only inclusion for the workplace, but also for the community as well is very important.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I actually saw that she'd built her first house at
Yes.
Harbour Town, is that right?
Yes, she did, yep.
Yeah.
7 weeks.
So it's really quite
to do that
impressive.
house.
And how was that received by your team and your staff?
Well, from our team, very well received as well, and that sense of respect, and also respect within the community and Roku as well. So it's a great stepping stone for her for the future, but also great to acknowledge up-and-comers in the future as well to follow the same footpath as what Susan has done.
Yeah, and she's creating jobs for her community too, and I guess a legacy for the community, so it's really very powerful. Yeah, thanks for sharing that example. Isabel, would you like to share your tip?
Yeah. First of all, I thought it was really inspiring. I think the school setup is a great idea. I think, despite what David just told us, inclusion should be something that is common, or that is in our everyday. We should aim to be inclusive of everyone, of every person. And like Vele mentioned earlier, it doesn't only make you the employer of choice. People will want to work for you if the culture is inclusive, if you feel comfortable going to work every day. But it's also proven that gender diversity in the workplace makes your business more profitable, and it has a tangible impact on the business performance. I've written down some stats so I don't butcher them. It is proven that gender diversity has higher financial returns, which can be 15% higher if the company is in the top quartile for gender diversity. If you have improved business decisions on gender diverse teams up to 73%, and your business can have higher operating margins if you have gender diverse leadership. Up to 48%, higher operating margins up to 42%, and higher return on sales up to 45% per share. So I thought that were really great stats, and really, really important to, not only is it the right thing, but it also makes your business more profitable.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think the business case is critical, right? You've got to have the statistics to back up these statements that gender inclusion makes good business sense. I'm wondering, Isabel, just as a follow-up question, how do you use that data when you're trying to influence upwards around gender inclusion?
Well, I think it's an important part for senior leadership to make a decision, especially when it comes to investing into bigger projects, like, for example, a school or a crash. It's just really, it is the fundament of a business. Every business has to be profitable. If you can build the case around increasing your profitability through gender diversity, while I'm sure a lot of senior leaders, I can speak for Swires Shipping, our senior leadership is very much for gender diversity, but if they see the numbers attached to it, then they can sell it even better to their bosses, right?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a fantastic tip. Vele, what would you recommend that the audience consider in terms of gender inclusion?
2 for me. You don't have to go and change the entire organization in the process. Just keep it simple. Find little things in the business operation that you can actually work on that doesn't have to cost anything. But I think it's one that is important that really needs leadership. I think the second one for me, and it's great that every thought leadership or every leaders in their own internal organizations are here in this room, and what is your leadership legacy in your respective organizations, but at the same time in your little spheres of influence? What is your legacy?
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And I think if everyone in the room today can go away and think about, well, what is their legacy? What can they achieve in this space? I think that is indeed very, very powerful. Hannah.
Thanks, Ellen. I think policies are good, but they're not everything. I think having a strong leadership management team in your organization drives this. So I'm proud to say at TotalEnergies we do that, and we've got 2 Papua New Guinean females on the executive team, the MANCOM, and we do ensure that we are involved in the BELIC programs as well, and we support that.
Yeah, so really it's a team effort, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think when you can see that change, you can see people like yourself in the leadership. So as a Papua New Guinean woman seeing other women progress, it probably means that it feels more like a space that you want to be in, you can aspire to. So I think that's really very powerful. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It seems like you've got the last word.
Yeah,
I think
thank
that's good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think one of the key message from the discussion so far, it really needs to be driven from the top down. The commitment, whether it's starting from the board down to your top management down. One of the reasons why, starting as a graduate trainee and I stayed within my first company for almost 10 years was because I had a lot of support from the top management down. And especially having good mentors. I think that's one of the key things within the organization. We need to have established people who can be really good mentors for employees that are coming in. For example, with TWM recently, with our graduate program, most of the graduates that we got in, about 80% of them, all females. Now, that's the challenging part also is how do we retain these females? How do we make sure that they stay within the company, help grow the company? And yeah, one of the things for myself as a graduate staying within this company for almost 10 years was because of the mentors and the support that I had within that company. So it really needs to be driven from the top down. The support needs to be there and clearly seen. We have our board from TWM that meets probably once or twice every year to set priorities for the next 5 years. One of the commitments that, like I've mentioned already, that we've done was to make sure by 2027, right, to have a 50-50 gender-based workforce, and that's giving more opportunities to women in the trade space, such as drivers and working in the workshops, for example. And then our MD Corey has also made a commitment to not be part of any panel discussions unless there is at least one female on the panel. So he's already leading the way with that commitment. So it's good to see that support is there. So it needs to be driven from the top down.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It really seems like TWM is walking the talk on gender inclusion, and that support is really coming from the top. Yeah. I wonder if others in the room would be interested in making that same commitment to only sitting on gender balanced panels, because this is probably one of the few that you've had a chance to see during this week. So thank you very much to P&G Corp for giving us this opportunity. The other thing I'd like to mention is that we're really pleased that this conversation was elevated to this room, because I think it's a very important discussion and one that perhaps needs to continue in future P&G Investment Weeks. So I'd like to thank the panel very much for your wise words, for your time today, and for your efficiency. We've actually wrapped up early, which might also be a record, I think, for the panels these last few days. So a round of applause for the panel. Thanks very much.